Hey everyone. Oh, welcome to the webinar. Welcome to the webinar, The Psychology and Neuroscience of Reboot, Rezoom. I'm in my office. Hello, welcome to my office. I've kind of put a bunch of stuff over there, so it's mainly out of the view of my, and then I put a bunch of stuff under there. Just put it all away. You know how it goes. Company comes over and you put a few things in the closet. So hey, welcome. You're the company. Thanks for coming over. Hi, I'm so excited to be here with you. Okay, so we have a lot of science to talk about. Lots of different science, neuroscience, psychology, more neuroscience, more psychology, some nutrition. Yeah, and all sort of plucked from disparate theories and fields and stuff because I have such an interdisciplinary view of the scientific landscape and all related to this notion of reboot, resume. I hope you showed up ready to hear about science. Okay, the psychology and neuroscience of reboot, resume. The psychology and neuroscience of reboot, resume. You ready? Here we go. Overview of this webinar. Here's what we're going to cover. The psychology and neuroscience of bright line eating in the sense of what's the neuroscience that happens in your brain when your lines are bright? A lot of people who have had a long stretch of bright lines have experienced profound shifts in the degree to which their brain suggests to them that they eat stuff that's not on the bright line eating plan. How do those shifts happen in the brain? And then what happens in the brain when you break and resume and break and resume? What's going on there? And then we're going to review quickly the resume reframe and the shift that's needed to create the resume reframe. When we get there, I'll be putting up the graph of the resume reframe and we'll talk about that shift. And then we'll talk about how exactly it is from a psychology and neuroscience perspective that the free again system from Reboot Resume creates that needed shift. So when we talk about food and actions and support, how does that create the shift that's needed? So this will all make sense as we go through it, but that's basically the overview. So, starting question, how does the brain change? How does the brain change when we do bright line eating and keep our lines bright? Here is like a 3-minute foundational neuroscience lecture. Now, this is like actually 7th grade biology, but basically the brain is made up of cells like every part of the body, right? And those cells are called neurons. Now, the word neuron just means brain cell, but it's just brain cells are given a fancy name, neurons. This part here, the cell body, that's like every cell in the body. That's like a heart cell or a skin cell or a toenail cell or whatever. But this part here, the axon, and this part here, the dendrite, those parts are unique to neurons. They're specialized for communication. And this is what neurons do with each other that no other cells in the body do in quite that way. They communicate. They communicate with each other. And that is what makes a brain, is that it's made up of cells that are specialized for communication with each other to figure out what's going on and how to respond appropriately. Now, the synapse is the little gap between cells, and this is a cell, the blue part down here, this is a cell up here. The synapse is actually just this little tiny strip, this little tiny thing between them. And when we change our behavior, like by starting bright line eating, for example, what happens is we create new synapses. This is a new synapse. Or we change the responsiveness of existing synapses by, for example, this guy right here just grew spontaneously through us doing a new behavior. We created a stronger connection between nerve cells. So when we do something new, we literally change the brain right then. Right then. Like if you write down your food tonight, and you haven't done that in a long time, or maybe you've never done that, but let's say you haven't done that in a long time. You take an existing synapse and you make it stronger right then by writing down your food tonight. It literally happens that fast. And then when you do something over and over again, let's imagine you write down your food tomorrow night and the next night and the next night. And now you've written down your food for a week and then 2 weeks and then 3 weeks. What happens is the brain is wired together in fiber tracts, which are these collections of axons that travel together in bundles, and they're like rivers or highways, and ultimately they create the neural networks of the brain. And it's very similar to a river, and a river flowing over dry land grooves a riverbed. I say this all the time, but it's important to remember that when you change your behavior, you are grooving riverbeds in your brain through doing something different today and tomorrow and the next day and the next day. You write down your food tonight and then the next night and the next night and for a week and then 2 weeks, and suddenly you have created a riverbed with water flowing in it that didn't exist before. And here's a picture. These are riverbeds in the brain. These are collections of neurons that have changed through someone's behavior over time. And you can literally see this behavior change happening in the brain in real time. So that is the neuroscience of change in the brain. Now, let's talk about the process of doing bright line eating resulting in someone getting free. We talk about free here a lot, right? Happy, thin, and free. Free from what? Free from what? Free from cravings. Free from having a brain that suggests to us that we might want to eat something off plan after dinner tonight, that we might want to focus our vacation on all the NMF that might be available in that particular location. A brain that suggests all manner of unhelpful food activities to us all the time. Freedom from that. So let's talk about the psychology of getting that kind of freedom. It has to, the psychology of that, to understand the psychology of breaking free from that, of having a brain that suggests ridiculous food options, like let's imagine you have diabetes, or let's imagine that you're just high on the susceptibility scale and you want to be free, right? Having a brain that suggests eating NMF left, right, and center is not helpful, right? What's the psychology of getting free? Well, we need to talk about conditioning. There's 2 kinds of conditioning, and both are in play. Classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning, you've probably heard of Pavlov's dog. With Pavlov's dog, Ivan Pavlov was he was not a psychologist, actually. He was a Russian biologist who was studying something else entirely related to canines. And he ended up noticing that when these dogs would hear the click, click, click of the heels of his assistant, who was wearing these ancient, these Russian sturdy wood-heeled boots, When the dogs would hear the click, click, click of her heels going down the tiled hallway, they would start to salivate. And he started to play little experiments, kind of curious about that. So you've probably heard that when a bell and food are paired together over time, you can make a dog salivate to just the sound of a bell. That's classical conditioning. You can also make that go away. You can make that go away, which is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about cravings here and what it takes to make those go away. Again, I'm going to say that again. We're going to talk about cravings and what it takes to make them go away. Meaning what it takes to take a brain that right now suggests to you all the time that you might want to eat some NMF off plan. If you don't know what NMF is, it's not my food. What's the science of taking a brain that suggests having some NMF all the time and making that go away? It's a process called extinction. Extinction. And a long time ago, 100 years ago, in Russia, a guy named Ivan Pavlov discovered that you could both make a dog salivate to the sound of a bell, and you could also make it stop salivating to the sound of a bell through a process called extinction. They've also done it in, chickens and pigeons pecking in certain patterns and stuff like that. But check this out. Here's a response right here, and here is a rapid process of extinction, meaning making it go away. Meaning here you have a brain that's suggesting like 9 times a minute, maybe you should have some food. Maybe you should have some food. Maybe you should have some food. This is after dinner, right? Maybe you should have some food. And then you don't give in to that. The next night, your brain only suggests 5 times, maybe you should have some food. You don't give in again. Why? Because you're in the Reboot Rezoom course and you've committed and you're getting support. So the third night, your brain suggests it 4 times. Maybe you should have some food. Maybe you should have some food. How about now? You want some food? The 4th night, it suggests it 3 times. And the 5th and the 6th night, it also suggests it 3 times after dinner. You're still not giving in. And you know what? It's not even that hard to not give in. Why? Because you're new in the Reboot Rezoom course and it's still really exciting. You're super motivated. And as a matter of fact, you're going online and you're posting, hey everyone, my brain is suggesting that I might want some food after dinner, but I'm not doing that. The kitchen is closed. And then you're reading the comments. Good for you. So proud of you. Well done. And you're like, yeah, here's my stupid brain. There it's going again. Maybe you should have some food. No, I don't think so, Mr. Brain. Thanks so much. And then the 6th night, 7th night, 8th night, it suggests it twice. The 9th night, it suggests it once. Now, we have data in the Bright Line Eating Bootcamp. By the end of the Bright Line Eating Bootcamp, most people are experiencing little to no cravings ever. Meaning the process of extinction happened sometime in the first weeks of the bootcamp, and it was a pretty thorough process. Now, here's the thing about extinction. There's something called spontaneous recovery. When you give in, well, we're going to get there. Hold on a second. Hold your horses, Susan. Okay. You get this? This is the process of making a brain stop suggesting that you might want to eat something off plan, which results in freedom. That is the process of freedom. It's a process called extinction. It's a very, very, very well documented psychological process. And it happens when you never give in to a previously trained reinforcement. Like if you previously trained your brain to hound you for food by giving it food under some conditions, when it would say, how about now? You want to buy some NMF walking, checking out of the grocery store through this aisle where they have all this NMF available? How about now? How about now? You're driving past a convenience store. How about now? You want some food now? Oh, look, you're driving past a fast food drive-thru. You want some food now? How about now? Oh, look, you just got your kids to bed. How about now? You want some food now? Oh, look, it's morning time. You're driving into work and there's a Starbucks. There's a Dunkin' Donuts. You want some food? How about now? How about now? You in the past have trained your brain to propose those things to you. And all it takes to make it stop proposing that to you is to stop giving into it and to be firm, to say nope, and then really close the door on it. But here's a question for you. How is the brain affected when we don't keep our lines bright? What happens is then we lose our freedom. So it's possible that you did the Bright Line Eating Bootcamp or the 14-day challenge, let's say, or maybe even you just read the book. I'm not sure what your history is. But it's possible that you experienced at some time in your past real freedom. That this is making sense to you. You're like, yeah, I remember that. I remember having a brain that was really quiet. Like I would go through my days and it wouldn't propose to me that I eat any of that stuff. It just wouldn't, it wouldn't suggest it. And then what, right? And then something happened. The holidays happened. The boot camp ended. Your father-in-law died. I don't know. You lost your job. You went on a cruise and you decided to make an exception. What I typically see is that kind of exception is entered into with some sort of thinking. We call this the saboteur around here, right? But it's a line of thinking that goes something like this. Wow, this bright line eating thing is feeling pretty easy. Wouldn't it be great if I just indulged a little bit during this holiday season, on this cruise, you know, whatever, during this time? Wouldn't it be nice if I just indulged a little bit? Wouldn't that be great? And then, like, you know, got right back on track. Like, it's probably not necessary for me to be as diligent and rigid as that Susan woman, you know, tells me I should be. It's probably not necessary. I think I'm going to be good. As a matter of fact, that little exception sounds so good. You know, the idea of having some NMF on that cruise, boy, I like that idea. And that goes along with like this romanticizing, right? I'll be there with my family, with my beloved, and we'll be sharing together in the fabulousness, like giving each other bites, and it'll just be wonderful. Yeah, I like that idea. Why don't I do that? Okay. Have you ever engaged in that? What happens then? We lose our freedom. So what's the psychology of that? Well, it's the psychology of, for example, slot machine addiction. Just saying, same psychology. So here's a little guy, and he goes to play a slot machine. He pulls the lever. He puts in a quarter, and he pulls the lever. What happens? Nothing. He goes, huh. He puts in another quarter, pulls the lever. And what happens? Nothing. Puts in another quarter, pulls the lever. Nothing. 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 Ding, 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 ding. Whoop, 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 whoop. Woo, woo, woo. Ching, 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 ching. Quarters are flooding into the little tray. Ching, 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 ching. All the heads around him are turning. All the other people, right, who are pouring quarters into their slots. Everyone's looking at him. All the eyes are bright. Oh my gosh, the quarters don't stop coming. They're flooding and flooding and flooding and flooding and flooding and flooding and flooding into the tray. Ding, 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 ding. He needs a bucket. He needs to go to the person at the casino and get a bucket for the quarters. There's so many quarters. As a matter of fact, he cashes them in. It's $150 in quarters. Oh my gosh. He goes out to dinner. He goes out to dinner with his wife, and then there's money left over. They pay off the phone bill that month in advance. They're so excited. Oh, it was the best day ever. Best day ever. His brain is like, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Wow, that was so good. That was so good. So he goes back to the slot machine. Nothing. 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 But now what's happened is that thing called intermittent reinforcement just wired his brain in a particular way. Intermittent reinforcement is a payoff that only comes sometimes. A payoff that only comes sometimes. And what intermittent reinforcement does is it creates resistance to extinction. Meaning, I didn't make a graph of this, but right here, your brain suggests 9 times, you want some food tonight after dinner? How about now? You want some food tonight? How about now? What about now? And you say no, 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 no. And then the next night, it's still up here. How about now? How about now? And then the next night, it's still up here. How about now? 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 And then the next night you give in because frankly, no one can withstand a brain that hounds you that much. That, my friends, is a problem. And then, of course, other changes happen in the brain related to giving into that food. Our mood plummets. Why? Because sugar is a depressant, and flour and omega-6 heavy foods cause depression. So our mood plummets, and we stop eating as many vegetables. Our mood plummets. Our isolator takes over to keep us protected from judgment and shame and criticism. And then our brain, of course, thinks we're starving because high insulin and high inflammation and high triglycerides lead to leptin resistance. And eating feels like the only solace from all of that. Can you see the problem? Okay, so this is the rut that many of us have found ourselves in. Now, it's possible that you are not in that rut. Maybe you're a crystal vaser. I'm still going to be talking to you in terms of the Rezoom reframe. Let's talk about the Rezoom reframe right now. Because my guess is everybody wants some of this. I want some of this. And I want it in all areas of my life, not just around my food. So some of us have this pattern, and I think those of us who do are more attracted than average to the bright line eating sort of philosophy and languaging and stuff. We're the kind of people who start off so strong with things. We launch off, especially on a new food regimen, we launch off strong with hope and diligence and motivation, and we do great for a period of time. Here's our success. We're doing so great. You see it? We're doing great. This is the red line. Oh, we're doing great. And then at some point in the future, this right here might have been that point where on that cruise we said, you know, I think I just want to have some NMF. I really do. I think it's a really good idea. I just want to have some. And I'm going to get right back on track. And then over time, maybe quickly, maybe slowly, we find ourselves plummeting into what I call the danger and destruction zone. This zone down here where our food is really off the rails and we just can't get back. And maybe at some point in the past, we're like, okay, this is ridiculous. I'm going to do a boot camp again. And so we get back into the Bright Line Eating boot camp and we launch off strong. And then maybe halfway through the boot camp, something happens, you know, like work gets really, really challenging. Someone in our family dies, or just maybe we just lose interest. I'm not sure. And we find ourselves on the downslope again. And maybe at some point along that journey, we pick up the NMF, and here we are in the danger and destruction zone again. Maybe NMF isn't the issue. Maybe it's the perpetual bag of nuts, or handful of nuts at night. Maybe, there's all kinds of different ways where this pattern manifests. But what we want is we want to recognize that these kinds of things, like in particular, the father-in-law dying, work getting hard, us getting sick, right? You can hear that I'm sick right now. Do I love being sick, giving a webinar? No, I still love giving the webinar, but I don't love being sick, right? Life, this is my favorite saying for 2019, life gets lifey. Life gets lifey. I forget who, I'm not the first one who said that. Someone said that to me and I just glommed onto it because I was like, oh, I so love that. So this right here and this right here, this is life getting lifey. And if we have a brittle program, this plummet into the danger and destruction zone is often the result of life getting lifey. So the question is, how do we inoculate ourselves from that? How do we recognize that we're going to experience what I call lapse phases? This right here is a relapse or a lapse. Relapse. Lapse again. Once again, lapsing. This is me not meditating for 4 days in a row, 5 days in a row. This is me, finding myself up late, night after night after night, making the executive decision to stay in bed later in the morning, and then not having, therefore, time to meditate, to exercise, to do the things I need to do to take care of myself in the morning. That's what this is for me. This is a lapse phase. This is me making fewer phone calls. This is a lapse phase. That is separate from this is me making myself a bowl of cookie dough and hiding out in my office and eating the whole thing. That's me in the danger and destruction zone. You see the difference, right? This is the lapse phase that is always going to happen. Life gets lifey and I lapse with certain things at certain times. That does not mean that I need to pick up the food. For me, as a 10 plus plus on the susceptibility scale, picking up the food is never a good idea. I need to work a program that results in me pulling myself back up into a resume phase before I ever touch the danger and destruction zone. I need to never get that low. And that involves 3 shifts to turn this red peaks and valleys into this gentle beige sine wave. Involves 3 shifts. Let's talk about them. How does the free again system of Reboot, Rezoom create this new reality? How do we do that? What are the 3 things? First of all, we need to shift our whole graph up. You see that? This right here, this blue line of the danger and destruction zone, that's the average point of this red Himalayan high highs, low lows, peaks and valleys. The average of the red peaks and valleys is the blue line. You see how this is the midpoint of this and that? You see that? Blue is the midpoint. Do you see how the midpoint of the sine wave, the midpoint between here and here, is way up here? Meaning we have shifted up, 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 a shift up of the whole thing. This graph is higher on average than this graph. You get it? That shift up is a shift up in the direction of higher success, more success on average. And what I mean by that in this way is greater happiness, greater well-being, greater flourishing. On average, you're keeping your pluses way higher. More pluses, fewer minuses in your life. So we need to shift this sine wave up. The second thing we need to do is we need to soften off those edges. Softer edges. You see how this edge right here is softer? than this sharp peak right here. You see that? Softer edges. So we need less panic, less anxiety, and more ease. Like when we start down into a lapse phase, it should be gentle, not fraught with panic, not a moment of eating and going, oh, it's all ruined right now. That was the moment. My life changed. Everything's ruined. Right? We don't want that, because that is basically the nature of this crash and burn. And then the third thing is we need a quicker shift in direction, meaning as we're going down, we need to catch ourselves and pull ourselves back up. Which means, like, see how here we go down for so long? We're going down, down, down. And right about here, we should be catching ourselves and figuring out how to pull ourselves back up by doing certain things to turn a lapse phase into a resume phase. Here, we don't do that. We hide, we isolate, we numb. We hide, we isolate, we numb. We procrastinate, we pull the shades, we eat, we kind of vaguely sense that something not very wise is happening, but we just procrastinate and hide and eat. We pull the shades and we keep going, and we just keep going down, 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 down. We do not take the actions to pull ourselves back up. So what it takes to pull ourselves back up is greater awareness of the downslide. Like, we need to not be non-conscious during this part. We need to be going, oh, okay, I can see, like, I'm actually in this right now. I'm in a down phase. I'm sick. My workload's been really high lately. I've been exactly in that spot of not meditating in the mornings because I'm up a little bit late and I'm sick and I know I need my sleep. But then the not meditating creates its own challenge of, like, facing the day without having meditated, but I'm aware of it. I have awareness that I'm in a lapse phase. I don't have panic about it. And I'm doing things to turn the lapse phase into a resume phase. I predict that I will get through this stretch without eating off plan. I'm not visiting the danger and destruction zone. I'm on the sine wave, not the red crashes and burns. Okay, so those are the three things. We need to shift everything up. We need to smooth off the edges, and we need a quicker shift in direction to turn a lapse phase into a resume phase. Those are the three things. Okay, let's talk about the free again system: food, actions, support. Let's talk about what food does to create this difference. Food will help us with the first two. The first two only. It doesn't help with this third part. It will help us shift up, and it will help soften off the edges. The shift up, greater happiness, well-being, and flourishing. I'm going to talk about that first. And it will reduce our panic and anxiety and create more ease. It'll soften off the edges. Okay, how does food do that? Well, the first question is, how does being on track with our food improve our happiness, our well-being, and our flourishing? What's the science of that? Well, the foods that we eat are powerfully tied to our moods. They really are. Just eating good food in and of itself creates happiness. What's the evidence for that? Well, in 2012, researchers from the University of Warwick and Dartmouth College studied the eating habits of 80,000 people in Britain. That's a lot of people in a study. And they found a direct correlation between positive mental health and the consumption of vegetables. I don't know if you've noticed, there's a lot of vegetables on the Brightline Eating food plan. A lot of vegetables. As a matter of fact, I'll share in a second how many. These researchers in this study found that the more fruits and vegetables someone ate, the less likely they were to experience mental health challenges like depression or anxiety. And the happier they were. So those are different things. Less depression or anxiety is not exactly the same as being happier. They are correlated, but they're not the same thing. They found the strongest effects up to 7 servings a day, but there was a direct correlation. People who ate 3 servings a day were happier than people who ate 2, and so forth. Happier and less depressed, less anxious, with the strongest effects all the way up to 7 servings a day. According to their definitions in Bright Line Eating, we would eat like 12 servings a day or something like that, because in general, a serving, according to them, is not a very big thing. Like if you're eating a big apple, that's like 2 servings. Now, there was another study in 2013 where researchers tracked the moods of 281 young adults, average age being 19 in the study. And what they found was an immediate impact, where eating lots of fruits and vegetables today predicted happier moods as quickly as tomorrow. And again, they found a linear correlation with the more fruits and vegetables a teenager or a young adult ate today, the happier they would be tomorrow, with 7 to 8 servings, again, predicting a very happy day the next day. This goes beyond just vegetables. Keep in mind that sugar, like alcohol, is a depressant. As a matter of fact, sugar and alcohol are molecularly almost identical. The only difference is that alcohol has an ethanol component to it as well, but it's sugar plus ethanol. So sugar is a depressant, just like alcohol overall. It's a mood depressor. And research shows that the less processed junk food someone eats, the happier they are. There's an entirely different line of research having to do with omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. I don't know if you know this, but the optimal ratio of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids is about 1:1 or 1:2. These are essential fatty acids, meaning we need to consume them in our diet. We can't make them. We can convert one kind to another inside of our bodies, but we can't make them from scratch. We need to eat some form of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. Now, unfortunately, the average ratio in the standard American diet, also known as the global industrial diet now, because we have, of course, exported it from America all over the world, in what people are typically eating, the average ratio is about 1:15 all the way up to 1:25, meaning 1 molecule of omega-3 for every 15 molecules of omega-6. That's what people are eating, even 1:25. Now that's problematic because in healing and repairing the brain, you need 1 molecule of omega-3 for every 1 molecule of omega-6, 1:1. So you've got omega-3, you've got omega-6, and these are in the lipid bilayer of cell membranes in our brain. Our brain, I don't know if you know this, is mostly fat. The brain is a big sack of fat. It's a very complicated sack of fat, but it's got tons of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. And to repair and heal the structures of the brain, you need one of these with one of these. Now, it's the same kind of issue when you've got a preponderance of a certain kind of amino acid and a dearth of other kinds of amino acids. What happens is if you've got, 15 omega-6s floating around for every 1 omega-3, what happens is in healing and repairing the lipid bilayers in the brain, the little guys that are in here constructing this lipid bilayer, the little guys will reach out for an omega, and they'll grab a 6, and then they're waiting for a 3. They'll reach out again, they grab a 6. Oh, nope, we can't use that. We need a 3. They'll reach out again, they'll grab a 6. Oh, no, we can't use that. We need a 3. They reach out again. We need a 3. Nope, there's a 6. And do you see how it is incredibly problematic to have them in the wrong ratio? Like what happens is the processes that heal and repair the brain, they get stuck. Now, where's all this omega-6 coming from? Well, it's coming from the vegetable oil in processed foods. Vegetable oils including soybean oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, sesame oil, and most vegetable oils. These are all almost entirely omega-6 oils. Soybean oil in particular is so ubiquitous that an estimated 20% of all calories in the standard American diet come from soybean oil. Soybean oil. It's ridiculous. If you just eat less packaged food, currently 58% of calories in the American diet, the standard American diet, the standard global industrial diet, 58% of calories are coming from highly processed packaged foods. If you just stop eating those and you start eating real food, your omega-6 consumption plummets. Like if you just start doing bright line eating and you just don't cook with vegetable oil, you don't cook with oil at all. And then for your fat serving, let's say you're adding olive oil to your salad, something like that. You will take your omega-6 consumption and you will just cut it like almost entirely down. That's all you actually need to do. A lot of people focus on trying to eat omega-3s. You could do that too. I mean, I'm a big fan. I eat tons of flaxseed every morning. Yay. And you can go and get, I recommend, if you're going to do omega-3 capsules, that you look at the algae ones. There's omega-3 in algae. But really, it's this. You just got to stop eating all that omega-6. That's the issue. And that creates a better omega-3/6 balance, which produces less depression and anxiety and higher mood. Another thing that happens when you keep your food clean is your dopamine receptors replenish. Your dopamine receptors replenish, which allows your cravings to ease away. And this results in a brighter outlook, restored hedonic capacity, that's our capacity for happiness, and fewer cravings. Another thing that happens when you keep your food clean in bright line eating is neurogenesis in the hippocampus increases. This is the creation of new brain cells. I talk about this all the time, neurogenesis in the hippocampus. The creation of new brain cells, which have a huge role in the production of serotonin and the lifting of mood. What increases neurogenesis in the hippocampus? Cutting out saturated fat, eating more vegetables, chewing versus swallowing your calories, literally mastication, increases neurogenesis. Eating healthy fruits like blueberries increases neurogenesis. Quitting smoking increases neurogenesis. All the things that you kind of know to be healthy in general increase neurogenesis. When you get your food straight, neurogenesis increases in the hippocampus. This results in stronger memory. The hippocampus is a memory center. It creates memories. More stable mood because of an increase in serotonin. And basically a healthy brain for decades, because when you have a factory that is constantly making new neurons, you have new neurons on hand for migrating to other parts of the brain and replacing damaged cells. So that's really helpful. Now keep in mind, these effects that I'm talking about here are dose dependent, meaning the more healthy foods you eat, the better. And just a few unhealthy foods, aren't as bad as a lot of unhealthy foods. What's not dose dependent is the intermittent reinforcement effect, meaning just once eating off plan, just once, is enough to create the intermittent reinforcement that will make your brain resistant to extinction. Meaning, if you have a brain that's currently suggesting that you eat off plan, whether it's a handful of nuts after dinner or some kind of exception on a cruise or whatever your particular flavor of exception is, if you have a brain that proposes that to you and you give into it periodically, that intermittent reinforcement is not dose dependent. It's just giving in once that creates the problem. Just like that guy in the slot machine, winning that jackpot in that slot machine just once created a brain that proposed to him basically forever and ever and ever. Maybe you should play now. Maybe you should play now. Maybe you should play now. Pull the lever again. Pull the lever again. Okay. Let's talk about actions and how they create the lift up. One of the actions that we talk about in Reboot, Rezoom and in Bright Line Eating in general is mindfulness meditation. So this is a picture of one of my heroes. This is Jon Kabat-Zinn. He's a world leader in meditation, the practice and the science of meditation. He's written some beautiful books. And he defines meditation as follows: paying attention on purpose in the present moment with acceptance. And what research shows is that meditation shifts activity into the left prefrontal cortex, from the right into the left. For example, like this. This is midline. This is the mind of someone in Tibet who had been meditating almost all of his life. He just meditated. And he had the strongest left prefrontal cortex dominant activity of any human being ever on record. Like, this is so far from average, it's ridiculous. Average would be, the peak would be here. His was entirely shifted left. Why? Meditating. What's the significance of this? The left hemisphere is happy. The right hemisphere is depressive. This man here has no depression. Happiness, just constant happiness. The effects of meditation, research shows, are it reduces the aging of the brain. It reduces depression, anxiety, and pain. Depression, anxiety, and pain. It changes brain structure more rapidly. It improves concentration and attention. It helps with recovery from addiction. Oh, that's helpful. We like that. And it improves immune response. And it elevates the mood. And it decreases the activity in the default mode network. Have you heard about this? The default mode network? The default mode network is the seat of the ego, meaning that neurotic self-referential loop in the brain that goes, how about me? Are people thinking about me? How does that all relate to me? Well, what about what I want? How about me? How about me? That's the default mode network. And when we're free of that, we feel peace and ease and no social anxiety. Meditation decreases activity of the default mode network, which is very nice. Breathing. Here's research that shows that when you're stressed and anxious, you breathe shallow. And if you take subjects and have them breathe shallow, they become stressed and anxious. It goes both ways. And oh, by the way, if you're calm and feeling well, your breathing is deep. Oh, and if you bring people into the lab and you make them breathe deep, you make them calm and well. It goes both ways. So this is another pathway by which meditating, and just saying, Monique Rhodes at the beginning of all of her tracks, she says, why don't we take 4 deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth? And by inviting you to breathe deep right away, She creates calmness and well-being. Meaning, just by sitting with Monique Rhodes for 10 minutes in the morning, you increase that red arrow going up, right? You raise your sine wave up first thing in the morning. Literally, just by doing something as simple as taking some deep breaths. I mean, it sounds trivial, but if you're not doing it every morning, it's not trivial at all. Once you start doing it, you create a calmness and well-being through that action. This right here, right? Also, one of the things we recommend in Bright Line Eating is a gratitude journal. This will be emphasized in Reboot, Rezoom. This creates a lift in mood also. This is the lift up in that arrow. Writing increases awareness, and actions tied to food and support create an integrated system. So let's talk about support. This is the free again system, right? Food, actions, support. How does support weigh in here? I want to talk about research related to the vagus nerve. This is the yellow guy right here. The 10th cranial nerve, which connects the brain to the vital organs, especially the heart, but also the lungs and the gut. It connects the brain to the vital organs. The vagus nerve, generally speaking, has parasympathetic effects, which means the opposite of fight or flight. It's the effects of calming, relaxing, resting, feeling connected, feeling well, feeling happy. The opposite of stressed and panicked. And the strength of this nerve is called vagal tone. This is important. I am excited. If you've never heard the science of this, hold on to your hat. This is going to blow you away. Vagal tone, meaning the strength of this nerve, is measurable. It's also typically stable, meaning researchers had thought, and doctors and so forth had thought, that when you measure someone's vagal tone, you couldn't really change it across the lifespan. Because typically when they measure it at time 1 and then they pull someone back in a year or 2, and then they measure it at time 2, and then they pull someone back in a couple years, they measure it at time 3, and they measure it across the lifespan, it stays stable. But more recent research, where people were put through a series of exercises, shows that actually you can improve vagal tone. It's not that hard to do. It's just that most people don't change the way they live very much across the lifespan. So most people experience stable vagal tone. But not someone doing Reboot, Rezoom. They would be doing exactly the kinds of things that would improve vagal tone. So the vagus nerve is the biological substrate of what happens when we change our level of social support. So it is through the vagus nerve that our brain stimulates our facial muscles to enable eye contact and to synchronize our facial expressions. Meaning, you need to have strong vagal tone to be someone who looks sympathetic and trustworthy. You know how you just meet these people? I don't know if you had a teacher or a yoga teacher or a grandparent or an auntie or an uncle or a best friend who's one of these people that the minute you meet them, you look in their face and you just feel safe and home. That is someone with strong vagal tone, so strong that their facial muscles and their facial expressions create a unique combination of movements that convey to you through eye contact and specific facial expressions that they care. The brain does that through training up facial muscles through high vagal tone. Vagal tone also adjusts the muscles in your inner ear to make you better at tracking someone's voice amidst background noise. Meaning, when you're having a conversation with someone in a party, a lot of people get distracted and they lose track of what you're saying to them because there's so much background noise. If you have high vagal tone, you stay connected and in tune with someone, even amidst a bunch of distracting sounds, because your brain is better at tracking the other person's voice and separating it out from the background noise. Which means across places, across situations, people find you to be a good listener. The vagus nerve connects your gut, your heart, and your brain, meaning it is where you get a gut feeling about something. Recent research shows that there is as much neurotransmitter activity in the gut as there is in certain parts of the brain, meaning your gut is communicating with itself and with your brain to give you signals about stuff. We call it a gut feeling, and we've had that saying in our language for a long, long time. Well, that is a thing. And oh, by the way, a quote-unquote gut feeling gets communicated to the brain through the vagus nerve. And having strong vagal tone will improve your intuitive sense about your gut feeling of what you should do or not do. How helpful is that? Same with the heart. The heart gives you signals to the brain. Let me just back up and say 90% of the connections in this vagus nerve are going up to the brain, meaning this nerve right here is the way that the heart tells the brain what it feels. It's the way the gut tells the brain what the gut feeling is. So if you don't have strong vagal tone, you miss out on what your heart and your gut are telling you. Now, I didn't realize I don't have a slide on how you measure vagal tone. You measure it through something called heart rate variability. So let me go back here and tell you, how do you measure it? Heart rate variability, what is that? Okay, it's actually a very simple measurement, and there are instruments these days that you can buy, commercial instruments that measure it for you every single day. I'm wearing one right now. It's called an Oura Ring. So there are these wearables, right? Fitbit and all these little things that you can wear, right? When they measure your heart rate variability, that is a measure of your vagal tone. Here's how it works. A strong vagus nerve is a nerve that's connecting the brain well, strong, clearly to the heart and also to the lungs. Now, let's think about the job of the heart. The job of the heart is what? To pump blood, right? So the job of the heart is essentially to pump out fresh oxygenated blood to the body, all of the body, and that's its job. Now, where does that oxygen come from? Oh, the lungs. We breathe it in through the lungs. Now, the heart and the lungs have no direct connection. They are connected to the brain through the vagus nerve. Strong vagal tone is when the heart knows what the lungs are doing, and the heart pumps out oxygenated blood when the lungs are inhaling that oxygen, meaning the heart goes, oh, look, the lungs are inhaling. I better pump hard to pump out that fresh oxygenated blood. And then when the lungs are exhaling, do you see how that's a moment when there's no fresh oxygenated blood coming in? And so a smart heart would say, oh, there's no oxygen right now. There's no new oxygen. Why don't I take a little rest? So I'm going to pump hard and fast on the inhale, and I'm going to rest on the exhale. There's no need to kill myself on the exhale. Why don't I just take a little rest? Those rests cumulative would add up to like bajillions of fewer heartbeats. Like, it would be a good idea for your heart to rest on every exhale. So basically, a smart heart that's informed of the lungs' activities beats faster on the inhale and slower on the exhale. And that difference in milliseconds between the heart rate on the inhalation versus the exhalation is the measure of heart rate variability. And that's how you measure vagal tone, because it's the vagus nerve that connects the heart and the lungs to the brain. That's the nerve that communicates that information. Okay. So, strong vagus nerve strength creates an upward spiral. It improves upon itself. The upward spiral goes like this. The more you connect with others in the moment, right here, right now, loving and being loved, the stronger your vagus nerve becomes. That's the way it works. The vagus nerve loves human connection, and it becomes stronger when we connect with others. We don't know why this is, but it's true. Research has shown that it's true. And oh, by the way, when your vagus nerve is stronger, you become more attuned to the readings of your own heart and your own gut. And then the better your inner ear and facial muscles get at translating your sympathy and care to others. And the more attuned you become to their facial expressions and their eye contact. And the deeper your connections with others become, and the stronger your vagus nerve becomes. It's a huge upward spiral. Now, vagal tone is typically stable throughout life, but it can be increased. Increased how? Through engaging in the right practices. In 2009, a study of participants in the Positive Emotions and Psychophysiology Lab, the PEP Lab in North Carolina, they did a study. They had an initial visit where they measured people's vagal tone. Wasn't that hard, just took their heart rate variability. And then for several weeks, participants logged onto a website and entered their emotions and their social connections that day. This was a nightly logging practice. Does this remind you of our actions in Bright Line Eating? We need to engage in tracking practices. Tracking in and of itself improves our behavior. Then, some of the subjects, half of them, in fact, were instructed to do some targeted nightly journaling. And it went like this. Call to mind your 3 longest social interactions of the day. And average them and ask yourself, on average, how true is it that during these social interactions I felt in tune with the persons or people around me? And during these social interactions, I felt close to the persons I was with. That's it. How simple is that? Not at all true, up to very true. So you could imagine, like, well, today I sat in a staff meeting for a long time interacting with people. I felt really not close to them and not in tune with them. We were kind of arguing about stuff and I didn't feel close to any of them. And then I went to happy hour with a bunch of people at work and this guy was talking to me, blah, blah, blah. I did not feel in tune. I did not feel close. And then I went out to dinner with my spouse. That was pretty good. I felt pretty in tune, pretty close. But I would say overall that was like a 2, right? It could be like that. Or you could think, wow, I talked on the phone with someone from Bright Line Eating. I got to know them. And like, I didn't expect it to go very well, but it went really well. And I felt so in tune and so close with them. Like, we had so much in common, it turned out. And then I went out to dinner with my spouse and that was pretty good. And maybe, I don't know, you got 3 interactions like that. You're like, oh yeah, that was a 6, right? So I'm just making stuff up, but that would be what it was like. Just tracking their connections each night through this simple 2 to 3 minute exercise, they ended up over the course of the experiment increasing their social connections, and that increased their vagal tone. So when they came into the lab at the end of the study, their vagal tone had gone up. Now, remember, this is remarkable because vagal tone doesn't usually change. It's typically stable throughout life. But with a 2 to 3 minute tracking exercise, making people note and care about their social interactions, they ended up having more social interactions and deeper social interactions, and that improved their vagal tone. This was a landmark study because it's not usually possible to change human physiology with such a simple intervention. Now, the improved vagal tone creates parasympathetic effects. That is, by definition, smoothing off the peak here. Softer edges, less panic, less anxiety, and more ease. The better your vagal tone, the less panic and anxiety you will experience at a juncture where you feel like you've fallen off track. Now, I want to present briefly some research by Stephen Cole, and that will be the end of the hard science portion of our webinar. Stephen Cole is a professor of medicine as well as psychiatry and biobehavioral sciences at the UCLA School of Medicine. His research uses computational bioinformatics to map the biological pathways by which social environments influence gene expression. So his research is on genes and social environments. Let's take a look at the last thing I want to do is talk about some science that shows that the types of changes you'll experience in Reboot, Rezoom go all the way down to your gene expression level. Let's talk about that. In his study, he looked at some older adults, 14 older adults, who over a course of 4 years differed significantly in their subjective reports of isolation. He took 8 people who consistently reported feeling connected and 6 people who consistently reported feeling isolated over 4 years. I have a question for you. On average, would you say that you feel socially connected or socially isolated? On average. What do you think? Where are you in this? Somewhere in the middle, maybe? Or are you consistently over a span of years connected or consistently over a span of years isolated? We've looked at people coming into our programs, and on average, compared to the general population, people come into our programs more isolated than the average person. And by the end of the course, whether it's the boot camp or Reboot, Rezoom, they are higher than average on social connectedness. Isn't that interesting? Okay, let's look at the genetic consequences of being socially isolated or socially connected. Let's look at it. Because what Stephen Cole did is he looked at their DNA, their whole genome, all 23,000 genes. And they used a heat plot to see the gene's fingerprints. And then what they did was through a mathematical examination, they found 200 genes, about 200 genes, that showed clear systematic differences in gene expression between the lonely and the connected people. And then they looked at those genes. Some of them were downregulated and some of them were upregulated. I'm going to show you the genes right now. Each row is a person and each column is a gene. So here are the about 200 genes, 131 right here and 78 over here. These are the lonely people in the rows going across, and down below are the socially connected people. Red indicates a gene that's more highly expressed than average, meaning this gene is going to town, expressing itself and making proteins that impact the body and the brain in certain ways. A black one is moderate, average, but a green one is low, meaning it's suppressed. So there's a correlation between being lonely and having these genes suppressed, but these genes turned on, overly turned on and expressing. And it's the opposite for the socially connected people. These genes are turned on and these ones are suppressed. Well, yeah, okay. But Susan, what are these genes? What do they do? Are you curious? I have presented these data before, so maybe you've seen them. Do you remember? Maybe this is your first time seeing it. Let's take a look. Over here, these genes are our immune response. These are the genes for immunoglobulin G production, immunoglobulin G production, which is our most common antibodies, and our type 1 interferon arrival response, which regulates our immune system. In short, lonely people have suppressed immune systems, and socially connected people have heightened immune systems. And over here, these are genes for inflammation. Inflammation leads to heart disease, inflammation leads to rheumatoid arthritis, inflammation leads to cancer, and oh, by the way, inflammation leads to leptin resistance, which makes your body think you're starving. It increases hunger, it increases appetite, and it makes your body, and it suppresses the desire to move, to be active, makes you feel tired, and it makes you hungry. That's what inflammation does. And if you're lonely, the genes that cause inflammation are overexpressed in you. And if you're socially connected, they're suppressed. So this is how the support part of the free again system literally changes you at the genetic level, the level of genetic expression. So in short, just an overview here, we've taken a look at how different aspects of the free again system create the needed shift in the Rezoom reframe. I am so grateful that you spent this time with me. Thank you so much. And I'm going to sign off.